Sam Lovegrove spent 7 years alongside Henry Cole on Shed and Buried, and together they became one of British television's most unlikely yet most beloved double acts, traveling the length and breadth of the country, crawling through muddy fields and forgotten sheds, breathing new life into rusted-out motorcycles and vehicles that time had long since given up on. But when Season 4 returned to Quest in May 2022, everything looked completely ordinary at first. Sam was right there for the first 10 episodes, doing exactly what he'd always done, checking gearboxes, running his hands over engines, and telling Henry within minutes what a so-called barn find was actually worth once you stripped away the rust and the seller's wishful thinking. Then, without warning, episode 11 aired and Sam's chair was occupied by someone else entirely, Fuzz Townsend, the well-known host of Car SOS on National Geographic. There was no introduction, no explanation, not a single word acknowledging that anything had changed. The show simply carried on as if nothing had happened, and it was precisely that silence which turned a quiet cast change into a genuine mystery. After all, when a producer decides to write someone out of a long-running show, viewers expect at least a passing mention, a thank you, some acknowledgement. Instead, there was only an empty space where an explanation should have been, and social media did what it always does when a show goes silent. It filled every blank with speculation. Some fans assumed Sam had been injured on set, since climbing through collapsing barns and 50-year-old sheds was never exactly risk-free work. Others pointed to the pair's well-documented on-screen disagreements over vehicle pricing and wondered whether that tension had finally spilled over off-camera. A smaller group even suggested Sam had simply been dropped in favor of a bigger name, since Fuzz Townsend already carried his own loyal fanbase from Car SOS. None of these early guesses came close to the truth. To understand what actually happened to Sam Lovegrove, you first have to understand who he was long before any camera ever pointed at him. His story didn't begin on television at all. It began on a dry lake bed on the other side of the world. Long before Shed and Buried existed, Sam was already building a serious engineering career that most viewers never knew about. He started out working at Gemini Accident Repair Center Limited, handling transmission and suspension work on high-profile repair jobs, the kind of hands-on, unglamorous technical role that teaches you exactly how a machine fails before anyone ever asks you to fix one in front of a camera. That grounding eventually pulled him into one very small, very exclusive corner of the automotive world, Brough Superior, the motorcycle brand nicknamed the Rolls-Royce of motorcycles, because of how expensive and precisely engineered each machine was. Sam worked there as a designer and engineer, the kind of behind-the-scenes role where your name shows up in specialist magazines but never on a poster. In 2013, that role placed him at Bonneville Speed Week in Utah, preparing a Brough Superior 750 cubic centimeters machine that the team nicknamed Baby Pendine. The bike Sam built and prepared went on to set 2 FIM world records and 2 AMA records in a single event, ridden across the Salt Flats by veteran motorcycle journalist Alan Cathcart, hitting just over 105 miles per hour on the return run to lock in an average of just over 101 miles per hour. Here's the detail most fans never connected. The third rider on that same Brough Superior team, the one who took the bike out for his own record attempt and posted a new AMA mark of just under 100 miles per hour, was Henry Cole. Years before either of them ever appeared together on Shed and Buried, Sam and Henry were already standing on the same salt flats, working on the same machine, chasing the same records. The television partnership audiences assumed had started with a chance meeting at a car show actually had roots in a genuine, high-stakes engineering project, one where Sam's work was tested at real speed, not for a camera, but for an actual world record. That shared history explains why their on-screen chemistry never felt manufactured. By the time producers eventually paired them for a motorbike series and later for Shed and Buried, Henry already knew exactly what Sam was capable of under pressure, and Sam already trusted Henry's instincts completely. Shed and Buried launched on Quest in 2015 with a premise so simple it barely needed explaining. Henry and Sam would travel across the UK, talk their way into people's sheds, barns, and garages, and buy whatever looked worth restoring: motorbikes, cars, tractors, boats, military vehicles, even old petrol pumps and vintage advertising signs. The split between the two men was obvious from the very first episodes and never really changed. Henry brought the charm, the gift of talking a nervous seller into a deal, and the storytelling instinct that turned a rusty old engine into a piece of history worth caring about. Sam brought the encyclopedic mechanical knowledge and the uncanny ability to tell, often within minutes of looking at something, whether it was genuinely worth the asking price or a money pit dressed up as a bargain. One of the clearest examples came when the pair bought a red Villiers motorcycle that had sat untouched in a shed for more than 50 years. Sam's inspection found it in far better shape than expected, needing little more than a filter change despite decades of neglect, aside from a few odd quirks like an upside-down headlight and a bent foot peg. Henry was thrilled, since fewer problems meant more profit. Not every find worked out so cleanly, though. A vintage lawn mower Sam was convinced would turn a tidy profit ended up being one of the weaker deals in the show's run, a reminder that even someone with his level of expertise couldn't win every gamble. Other trips took them into Northern Ireland, where they uncovered army vehicles and Land Rovers hidden away for decades, and into a Cornwall cottage that looked almost like a private transport museum, packed with tractors and machinery in every stage of disrepair. On another occasion, they walked away with a set of original 1930s factory-made trailers, an orange tractor, and a vintage crow scare that Sam genuinely wanted for himself, simply because it reminded him of his own childhood. A stop in Leicester connected them with a former motorbike racer whose personal collection included a rare 1962 Greaves Sportsman, a machine significant enough that acquiring it felt less like a purchase and more like touching a genuine piece of motorcycling history. The show's success led directly to two spin-offs, Find It, Fix It, Drive It, where the pair restored a vehicle and then actually took it on the road to test what their work was worth, and Junk and Disorderly, where they challenged themselves to flip automotive junk and collectibles found at auctions and swap meets for a profit. Across every one of these shows, the format barely changed, because it didn't need to. Audiences weren't tuning in for a twist, they were tuning in for two men who genuinely knew what they were doing and genuinely enjoyed doing it together. But there was one part of Sam's personality that showed up again and again across every single one of these shows, and it's the part that explains almost everything about how he handled his own eventual disappearance. He was famously stubborn about money in a way Henry sometimes wasn't. When a seller tried to push the price up mid-negotiation on a BSA Gold Star, Sam refused to budge, even though it meant walking away from a bike he clearly wanted. When another seller hiked the price on a vintage petrol pump after the two had already agreed on a figure, Sam pushed back hard on camera rather than letting Henry smooth things over. Fans who followed the show closely started describing him with the same word again and again: principled. Not stubborn for the sake of it, but someone who had clearly decided long before the cameras ever showed up exactly what he thought something was worth, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise just to make good television. Henry could talk his way around almost anyone, but even he knew better than to argue once Sam had made up his mind about a price, because Sam's read on a machine's real value was rarely, if ever, wrong. That same steadiness applied to how Sam handled fame itself. Despite years of screen time and a genuine fanbase of his own, he consistently avoided the parts of celebrity that had nothing to do with the actual work: no talk show circuit, no panel appearances, no magazine profiles chasing his newfound popularity. That same restraint is exactly what played out when episode 11 of season 4 aired without him. Sam didn't post an explanation. He didn't give an interview clarifying the situation. He didn't even acknowledge the online speculation swirling around his name. For a man who had spent nearly a decade in the public eye, staying almost completely silent was, in its own way, a statement, and it left an information vacuum that fans filled with theories for months. That vacuum didn't stay empty forever, though the eventual explanation, when it finally came, wasn't delivered by Sam himself. In March 2022, months before episode 11 even aired, Henry Cole posted a video addressing Sam's situation directly, though anyone hoping for a full explanation walked away with barely more than they started with. According to Henry, Sam had been unwell after being bitten by a bug, and that illness was part of the reason he hadn't been able to keep working on the show. That single detail, a bug bite, became the entire foundation fans had to build theories on for the better part of a year. Henry never specified what kind of bite it was, how serious the reaction had been, or how long Sam had actually been dealing with it. No timeline was given for when the incident occurred, or when, if ever, Sam would be back to full health. For a show built entirely around hands-on, physical restoration work, even a relatively minor injury or illness could mean months away from filming, but nobody outside Sam's immediate circle knew which one this actually was. The lack of detail didn't settle anything. Instead, it multiplied the speculation. Some assumed it must have been something relatively minor, a nasty but ultimately harmless bite that simply needed time to heal. Others assumed the opposite, reasoning that Henry wouldn't have bothered addressing it publicly at all unless it had been serious enough to genuinely threaten Sam's ability to keep working long-term. A smaller group latched onto the timing itself, pointing out that Henry's video had arrived months before episode 11 even aired, meaning Sam's absence from filming may have started well before viewers noticed anything on screen at all. Eventually the silence broke, not with a statement, but with a visit. Henry Cole traveled down to Cornwall to see Sam in person, and the footage from that trip, released under the title Whatever Happened to Sam Love, gave fans their first real look at what Sam had actually been doing during his time away from the show. What Henry found wasn't a man in crisis. It was Sam doing exactly what Sam had always done, working quietly in his own shed on his own projects, away from a film crew schedule and a network's editorial choices. The visit showed him still deep in restoration work, still surrounded by the kind of vintage machinery that made him a fan favorite in the first place, just without the cameras dictating what came next. For a man whose entire public identity had been built around appearing on screen next to Henry, watching him thrive completely outside that format told viewers something the show itself never had the chance to. That footage answered one question while raising a much bigger one. It confirmed Sam was healthy enough to keep working, actively producing the kind of craftsmanship fans had loved him for, which ruled out the darkest theories that had circulated online. But it also confirmed something else entirely. Sam had every physical ability to return to Shed and Buried, and he simply hadn't. That distinction mattered enormously to longtime viewers, because it shifted the entire conversation. This wasn't a story about someone being forced out by injury. This was starting to look like a genuine choice. The visit didn't come with an announcement about Sam rejoining the main series, but it didn't come with a farewell either. Henry and Sam's friendship was clearly intact based on everything shown in that reunion, which ruled out the falling out theories almost entirely. In the years since stepping back from the main lineup, Sam hasn't disappeared from the world he built his reputation in. He has continued consulting for private collectors and institutions connected to vintage motorcycle preservation, including work tied to the National Motorcycle Museum, the same organization that once listed him among the figures worth watching in British motorcycling. A Triumph Thruxton restoration credited to Sam was highlighted in a classic motorcycle publication as a genuine technical achievement, the kind of recognition that has nothing to do with television ratings and everything to do with actual craft. According to people who've followed his career closely, Sam has also turned down chances at his own solo television project, choosing instead to stay loyal to the partnership with Henry rather than chase a bigger spotlight on his own, a decision that fits everything fans already knew about him. His approach to the work itself hasn't changed either. Sam has always preferred repairing an original part over simply replacing it, and when a piece genuinely can't be sourced anymore, he manufactures a replacement himself using traditional methods rather than reaching for a modern shortcut. That philosophy is exactly why collectors keep calling him years after the cameras stopped following him around. It was never about performing restoration for an audience, it was about doing the job correctly, whether anyone was watching or not. Henry, for his part, has never treated Sam's absence as a permanent ending. Every public mention of Sam from Henry has left the door open for a return, without ever pressuring Sam to walk back through it on anyone else's timeline but his own. A meaningful detail on a show built around two people, because it means the partnership was never officially over. It was paused indefinitely by the one person who had every right to decide that for himself. As it stands, Sam Lovegrove continues restoring vintage machines from a workshop based near Redruth, Cornwall, largely away from cameras. He's known to be married with 4 children, and just like everything else in his personal life, he has kept that entirely out of interviews and public statements, letting his actual work speak for him instead. He built a decade-long television career without ever needing to explain himself to an audience, and he stepped back from it the exact same way, quietly, on his own terms, without a single dramatic announcement.